Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we'll be looking at GitHub Actions. So what are GitHub Actions? When can they be used? Why should you learn them as a developer? So we'll introduce you to the world of GitHub Actions in this video, and we'll demonstrate to you how you can automate your different software development processes and workflows with GitHub Actions, which can help you to greatly improve your productivity. So GitHub Actions is a powerful automation tool that allows you to developers to define and automate their workflows right from the GitHub repository. So for example, if you push your code to GitHub, you want it to be automatically deployed, you can use GitHub Actions for that. With GitHub Actions, you can easily build, test, and deploy your code with ease just by doing a simple git push the repository. Your code can be run, tested, and then finally deployed to the server without you having to do anything. So as a developer, it simplifies a lot of things for you. So in this video, we'll start by explaining what GitHub Actions are. We'll look at the different common terminologies, and why they're important to you as a software developer. We will then walk through a simple two project with GitHub Actions, whereby we'll build a simple calculator, write some simple tests for it using PyTest, and then finally we'll see if you push it to GitHub, how GitHub Actions handle the process of building our code, testing it, and then make sure everything works. Okay, so we'll also cover some basic practical example which I mentioned already. So whether you're a beginner or an experienced developer that's looking forward to get into GitHub Actions, this is a great resource for you. This video should be about 30 to 40 minutes long, so it shouldn't be longer than that. So join and let's all have fun learning GitHub Actions. And also I'll show you the different things that you need to learn from GitHub Actions, so you can take your software development to the next level by writing GitHub Actions. Okay, so done with all of the introduction, let's get into the coding part. Okay, so we already talk what the course is going to be about. Okay, so we've learned the basic concept, terminologies, and stuff like that. So this is a course outline. We'll look at the understanding of the basic things in GitHub Actions. We'll do components of GitHub Actions. We'll look at two different projects. This is project 1 and project 2. Sorry for that. That's an error on my end. Okay, so let's begin by what's a GitHub Action. So GitHub Actions is a continuous integration and continuous delivery, or CID, CI/CD pipeline platform that allows you to automate your build, test, and deployment pipeline. Okay, so this exactly, I got this definition, this like description from the GitHub repository. So I mean, from the GitHub official documentation. So GitHub Actions is just allows you to perform CI/CD. So if you're wanting to go into the world of DevOps or something like that, this place is a good stepping stone to begin with. Okay, so it allows you to do different stuff to automate your building, your testing, and the deployment pipeline and stuff like that. Okay, so just like DevOps, right? So is GitHub Actions DevOps? Really, GitHub Actions is more than DevOps, but all GitHub Actions and DevOps all point in the same direction, right? To help you to automate different tasks. So GitHub Actions not really is really not like a DevOps. It has some advantages and some weaknesses compared to DevOps. Okay, so GitHub Actions can run on different platforms. Can run on Windows, Linux. Most of the time you'll be running things on Linux, right? Because you'll be trying to simulate things on servers, and most servers are probably powered by Linux. You can run it on Windows, Mac OS, virtual machines You can use all this to run your different workflows. Or if you want, you can even host your own servers to run your different GitHub Actions. Okay, in case you're building a big application that needs scaling, you can go for that. So components of GitHub Actions, we look at what are workflows, what are actions, event, jobs, and runners. Okay, so what's a workflow? Workflows, these are simply just processes you define in a YAML file that you use to run your job automatically or manually, or even on a schedule. So basically that's what a workflow is. A workflow is just a YAML file consisting of different steps, or we call jobs, that you write down, tell the GitHub action what to do in case the code is pushed to GitHub or pulled or something like that, right? We call those on triggers or events. We'll look at them just in a few seconds. Okay, so workflows are defined within the .github/workflows directory. So we have GitHub folder, and then inside of there we have a .github folder. Sorry, we have a .github folder. Instead of the .github folder, we have something called workflows folder. Instead of the workflows folder, that's when you write your different workflows. Okay, we create a different YAML files, and then you write your workflows inside. So that's what are called workflows. And this folder is usually in the root directory of your project. So what are events? Again, I told that workflows can be triggered to run, right? So whatever triggers the workflows to run, like we call this one events, right? So they're called event. This could be a pull request. So you can instruct GitHub that whenever my code is pushed to GitHub, this event should run and this workflow should be ran. Okay, something like that. Maybe if you push your code to GitHub, you want your test to be run against your code to make sure that you don't have any errors before you push it to production, right? So that could be an event, a pull event, a push event, a pull request event, or a push event. Can be a trigger. Okay, and that's what we call events. Okay, let's look at what a runner is. So we will say that you run your code on a virtual machine, right? As I mentioned earlier, we run your workflows on a virtual machine. So what are these virtual machines called? And these are called simply runners. So runners, this is just a virtual machine or a server that runs your workflows whenever it's triggered. So whenever it's triggered, you push your code to GitHub. That's a push request, right? So the event is triggered, the runner begins to run. So where do you run your application? GitHub simply creates a virtual machine and in an isolated environment and simply begins to run your workflows, install your dependencies, whatever you need to be done, and then begins to run your workflows to make sure everything works. Okay, so each workflow runs on its own virtual machine, and a runner can have only one workflow at a given specific time. So GitHub provides us with Ubuntu, Linux, Microsoft, Windows, and Mac OS runners. And you can use all of these different operating system platforms to basically act as runners, which is basically virtual machines that run your different GitHub jobs. Okay, so GitHub Action jobs. Okay, so you can provide your own host to run it if you want, maybe because you are working a big operation or something like that, and you need actually power to run your actions. Then probably go for custom hosting, right? So an action is a custom application for GitHub Actions. So basically, an action, basically we do that. For example, we are trying to push code to GitHub, right? And after we push the code to GitHub, we want Python installed on the virtual machine. That is something that is done commonly every time, right? So instead of having to write the script, right? You can write script yourself to do this, but instead of having to write script yourself, uh, you can go to the GitHub Marketplace and find that developers already write some simple actions like that that can help you install Python on your server or on your virtual machines. So these are called actions. So actions are just custom applications that are already written that perform tasks that you carry out frequently, right? Before you can run any test against your application, you have to install Python on your virtual machine, right? So or on your runner. So you do this constantly every time. So writing a script, do it all the time. It can be monotonous. So we have simply actions that are just in the GitHub Marketplace, and look at the GitHub Marketplace so you can find all these actions. Okay. So now let's go ahead and talk about another component of your GitHub Actions. So we talk about jobs. What a job? Jobs are step-by-step set of instructions that are executed on the runner. So a job is just an instructions. Like for example, if you want to run a Python application, first of all you have to clone your repository, check your master branch, pull the code to your virtual machine, install Python, and then install your dependencies, and then finally run your application, right? So those are the different steps that you can follow. So you define all these steps inside of your jobs, right? Check the main repository, pull the code to the virtual machine, install Python, install dependencies, and then finally run your application. So these are all the different steps. So all these steps are defined in what we call a job. So a job groups together all these steps into one, which you call a job. And you can give your job names, and it shows you whenever the job is running, what job is running. You can see the name of the job and look at that in just in a second. Okay, so jobs can run in parallel or in sequence. So if you have jobs, for example, you have job 2 depends on job 1 in this specific image, right? So you can see job 2 requires job 1 to finish. So job 2 would have to wait for job 1 to finish and then pass it on to it some information or some data that is needed for job 2 to run. Also, you can have job 3 which doesn't depend on anything else, and it will be running in parallel with job 1 and 2. So basically, you can have jobs that are running in series, like sequences, or you can have jobs that are running in parallel. Like in this case, job 3 is going to be running in parallel to job 1 and job 2, right? And then all of the outputs from those go to job 4, and then job 4 run. So job 4 is going to wait for job 2 and job 3 to get done, but job 3 doesn't depend on any other job. So it's going to be running in parallel to job 1 and job 2. So it can run in parallel or in sequence. Okay. So that's about jobs. So good. So now that we have looked at all the basic terminologies of GitHub Actions, let's go ahead and begin to write some code. So you're just going to create a GitHub action that whenever we post our code to GitHub, it's simply going to just run the Python script that's going to be saying hello world. That's going to be printing hello world. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a GitHub action for that. After we finish that, we'll go into project 2, whereby we build a simple calculator and then write up a set of PyTest scripts to make sure that our calculator actually works and giving us the right values. And then that will be the end of of this video. So let's jump into it. So I'm going to go into my terminal right here. I'm going to create a directory. So I'm on Linux. So I'm going to use mkdir, and I'm going to call this directory. I can call it GitHub Actions. Okay, just press enter. Change directory to my GitHub Actions. So once I'm inside of the GitHub Actions, I'm going to go ahead and create. For the let's just go ahead and open this in VS Code. Feel free to use any editor that you're comfortable using. I'm going to be using VS Code, so you can use any editor that you want. I'm just going to be using VS Code. So once I'm in here, I'm going to go ahead and create a folder. So create a folder. I'm going to call this folder scripts. It's going to be sorry, my Python scripts. So scripts. Let me just close off this. Okay. So I'm going to call this one scripts, and it's going to have my Python scripts. And I'm going to create now the folder, the GitHub folder that's going to consist of our GitHub workflows. So I'm going to go ahead and create a folder right here. It's going to be called git ignore git ignore /workflows, just like that, and press enter. So good. So sorry, my bad. I created a git ignore file instead of GitHub file. So my bad. Let me just do that again. So we call it git dot github, right, and then press enter. So once you create a GitHub folder, now .github folder, okay, so it's a dot and then GitHub. Okay, so once you have that, we're going to create another folder in there called workflows. I think workflows is already created right here. Okay, good. So create a folder called .github, and then instead of it, create another folder called workflows. Okay, so instead of my scripts folder, I'm going to go back into my script folder. I'm going to write a Python script that's going to simply print hello world. So I'm going to say hello.py, and then simply press, and then I'm going to simply have a print statement. This print statement is simply going to be saying hello world. This is a git. Let's just use uppercase GitHub actions, just like that. So good, we have that done already. So I'm going to go into my workflows, and I'm going to go ahead and create a simple workflow, and I'm going to call it, you can call it anything you want. I'm just going to go ahead and call mine, I'm going to call it project 1. So I'm going to say project, so project -01.yaml file. So it's going to be a YAML file. I can use .yml, sorry, .yml, or you can say YAML, like that. It also works. I'm going to use YML and just press enter. So instead of my my project 1.yaml file, I'm going to go ahead and let me just close this prompt. So I'm going to go ahead and define my workflow. So the first thing I need to go ahead and do is give this workflow a name. So I'm going to simply say the name, and I'm going to call this one, let me just say project 01. Okay, so that's the name of this workflow. Okay, and this is the name that will appear on the GitHub repository whenever we push this to GitHub, and we'll do that just in a bit of a second. So the first we need we use is give the workflow a name. Okay, so you can even write comments if you want. So let's get workflow name, just like that. Good. So once we have that done, I'm going to go ahead and now specify a trigger. So on which action or on which event should our GitHub Actions workflow run? So we're going to go ahead and specify the event right here. So I'm going to say an event, or basically a trigger, just like that. So we call it an event or a trigger. So it's going to be on, and it is going to be a list, right? So we're going to use a list right here. So we can say on push event whenever a push event occurs, or we can say a pull underscore request. So whenever a push occurs, we can run our workflow, or whenever a pull request occurs, we can run our workflow. In this case, we want to run our workflow only whenever we push code to GitHub. So we can delete this and just say push. Okay, so whenever a push happens, means when we push our code from our local repository to our GitHub repository, online repository, then the workflow is going to run. So that's basically the trigger, good, or an event. So another way you can specify this is you can go ahead and simply say this as well. You can say push. So you can go ahead and also define this in another way. You can say push, and then you can go ahead and say branch on which branch you want the event to run. or let's say is it branches, and then go ahead and specify the branches, right? In this case, we want the master branch, right? So you can just say master. So that's it. Another way you can specify this action. So whenever you push something to the master branch, that's when your workflow is going to run. That's another way you can specify. Okay. So this workflow will only run whenever you put something inside of the master branch. So you can check out which branch you want, but by default is the master branch. So we're not going to worry about that. But if you have any other branch that you want to use, you can go ahead and specify on which branch you want it to run. Okay. So good. So once we have that done, let's move on. So now we have the event specified. Now I'm going to go ahead and define the jobs. Okay. So we just say a job is a sequences that we run, right? So the first one to go ahead and do is, first of all, give our job a name. So let's give it a name. So name, and it's going to be called you can call it anything you want. So let's say, let me just call this one test underscore job. Okay. Job, just like that. Good. So that's the name of our job. And then now what do we want to do? So the first we want to do is to specify on which platform or on which operating system we want to run our application on. So commonly it's mostly Ubuntu. So I'm going to simply say this is going to be the OS or platform. Okay. So I'm going to say on runs or runs hyphen on, and then you go ahead and specify which OS that you want to run on. So I'm going to say this is going to be Ubuntu hyphen latest. Okay. So Ubuntu latest, and you can read more about different environments that you have or platform that you have, but in this case you're going to be using Ubuntu latest, which is the most commonly used operating system. Okay. So once we have that, now we go ahead and specify the steps that it needs to take. So we're going to go ahead and say steps, and you're going to go here and say steps, just like that. So good. So the first thing you want to go ahead and do is to now take the code from our master branch, because here you didn't specify any branch, so it's going to be using the master branch. So what you want to do is take the code from our master branch into our runner, which is going to be our virtual machine. And to do that, we can write scripts to do that, but there's already a GitHub action for that because it's something that is commonly done all the time. So there's a GitHub action, and you can just go and read more about it. So let me just go. So let's go ahead and take a look at this custom already defined GitHub action for us. So we can just go in here and just search for, let me just say checkout, and then press enter. And you can find we have checkout right here. You can just click on it, and then you can find this what it does. So it checks out your repository and blah blah, your username, and then finally does something, right? It pulls code from somewhere and then uses it somewhere else. So you can read more about it if you want. You can just go to GitHub Marketplace. Okay, github.com/marketplace, and then finally you just search for the checkout action, which basically pulls the code from your repository into your runner. Okay, so that's what we want to do. We want to get the code from our repository into our runner. So what we want to go ahead and do, we're going to go ahead and simply say hyphen users, and then we want to go ahead and specify actions. So we're going to be using a GitHub action / the name of the action is going to be checkout. Okay, so check out, we're going to say at version 3. So we're going to check out version 3. So once we have that specified, you're going to be using GitHub action called checkouts, and you're going to be using the version 3. Okay, so what you want to go ahead and do right now, this is only going to help us to pull our code into from our repository into our runner. Okay, so once we have that done, we are good to go. So now I also want to use another action that's going to help us to set up Python and install Python on our machine, basically on our runner. So you can go ahead and search for again. So this is going to be called setup-python. So we're going to go ahead and say setup Python, and then search for that. So you can also find this is right here, this one right here, and you can find this simply helps you to set up your Python environment. So pulls the code and then finally set up your Python environment. So I can just simply go ahead and simply copy this right here. So copy that, and I can go down back here and I simply paste it right there. So let me fix that indentation. Okay, good. So we are good to go, and then make sure that this is indented. Okay, according to the documentation right here, you can find it's indented. Okay. Okay, good. So now this is going to go ahead and install Python on our virtual machine, basically our runner. Which Python version are we installing? We are installing Python 3.10, Python 10, right? So 3.10, or you can use Python 3.9 if you want. Okay, so feel free to specify any version of Python that you want to install. So once we have this done, I want to go ahead and run a simple script. So sorry, I want to go ahead and run a simple script. So what I can do, go ahead and run a simple script is to say run, and then I can go specify the script that I want to run. So we pass in the command that we want to use to run our application. So make sure that I have this right here. Okay, so run, and I'm going to say, how do you run a Python application? So basically, let me just bring back this right here. To run a Python application, you just have to change directly into my scripts. Okay, and we simply say Python 3, and then finally hello world.py, and then you can see print hello world.py. So we need to use this command to specify on which Python application to run. So let's say Python 3, and then I want to say ./scripts, which is this folder right here, scripts, and instead of the scripts, we want hello world.py. So hello world.py. So basically hello.py. So that's basically it for this GitHub action. So basically, we create a workflow, we give it a name, we specify on which trigger or on which event it should run, and it's going to be a push whenever I push our code to GitHub. And then we define the job in here. So in this case, we have only one job. We can have multiple jobs, as we discussed earlier on, and I'll show you in the next project how to do that. Okay, so after specifying the job, this job is going to be running on which platform? We said Ubuntu latest. And then what are the steps that you need to do for the first of all, get the code from our repository, basically our repository, the master branch. After you have the code, what you want to go ahead and do is simply install Python on a machine, which is going to be done by this GitHub action called setup-python. You're using version 4. And then we specify which version of Python you want to install. You're installing Python 3.10, right? And then finally, we're going to specify the run action, which is going to go ahead and simply run this command. That's going to go ahead and run this code right here, as we did in the terminal. So good. That's all we need to do. So once we have this done now, we can go ahead and create a GitHub repository and try to push our code to GitHub. Okay. And if you push our code to GitHub, the event is going to be triggered and it's going to run this workflow. Okay, good. So once we have that, let's go back in here. I'm just going to go ahead and open up my GitHub repository. So, or go to GitHub. So once I'm in there, I'm just going to say repositories, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new repository. I have this repository I created yesterday just for testing. So I'm going to say GitHub Actions Tutorial, just like that. So GitHub Action Tutorials, and I'm going to go ahead. This one I'm going to make the public. Okay. So I'm also going to leave the code in the link in the description in case you guys want to have access to it. So go ahead and create that repository. So once we have that repository created, you can follow the steps on setting that repository on your local machine. So I'm just going to go in here, open up this, and I'm going to simply do git init, right? And then, oh, sorry, I did a git init in the wrong place. So I'm going to say rm -rf and then .git, and then delete that. So once I have deleted it, I cannot see it in here anymore. So I'm going to go back to my root directory. So once I made sure of my root directory, now one thing you can notice is that you don't see this .github folder because it's hidden. Any folder with a dot in front of it is hidden, so that's why you don't see it. So to see it, you have to do LA. Okay, if you're on a Windows, if you're on a Linux or a MacBook, for Windows, I'm not sure how to do that. You can just Google that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and simply create my GitHub repository in here. So I'm going to say git init, and then press enter, and then finally I'm going to go ahead and simply add that command that I got. So add that origin. Okay, so once I have that, let me just clear the terminal, and then if I do LA, you can see now I have the .git and .github, which have our GitHub workflows. Okay, and then our scripts. So I'm going to finally do a git push. I'm going to say git add. Okay, add everything, and then git commit -m. This is going to be first commit, and then finally git push origin to the master branch and push. Okay, so once I have that, it's going to ask me for my password. Okay, my password has been there, so it's already pushed to GitHub. So if I go back in here and press right here, and then finally go into my GitHub actions. So once I get into my GitHub actions, actions right here. Okay, so once I go into my GitHub actions, I don't see anything. Okay, so once I come back here, just recognize I made a typo when creating the GitHub workflows folder. Okay, so this is workflows, and then I didn't type there's a K missing over there. So let me just go ahead and actually edit this, and then let me just go here and then say rename it, rename, and this is going to be workflows. Okay, so it's a K, so work and then flows. Okay, so that's my typo. So I'm going to go ahead and simply change that file. Okay, so once I have it done, I'm going to go ahead and simply do a git add again. So git add, git commit, and then finally I do git push again. So sorry for that typo, I just misspelled the workflows folder. Okay, so once I have it now, GitHub should be able to pick up my GitHub action. So if once it's done, you can see we have our first commit, which is going to be running a certain GitHub workflow. You can see this the job that we have called the test job. This is what we define inside of our we can see we have right here, the test job, which is this job right here. So you can see it's running, and it has completed running. So if I go, I click on it to expand it, you can see the different steps it went to. So this is the first step, right? Set up a job, and then finally run the GitHub action, which gets the code, okay? And then finally set up the Python environment, which install all the Python version 3.10. And then finally we run our script, which basically prints hello world, this is a GitHub action. Basically it does it, and then finally does the completing steps. So good. So that's basically how we can run a GitHub action. So my bad, I just forgot to rename the file, the name of the workflows folder properly. So make sure that you have that renamed named on your computer perfectly. Okay, so that's basically how we can run a GitHub action. So whenever I do a git push, your code will run automatically. In this case, we're just going to be printing hello world, this is a GitHub action. This is what we define inside of our folder right here. Okay, because this is the only thing we are running down here. Okay, good. So good. Once we have that done, we are good to go. So now let's go into project 2. So into project 2, what you're going to be going ahead and doing is building a simple calculator, right? And we're going to have also going to run a couple of tests to test our calculator to make sure the calculator works and gives the correct answers. Okay, so we're going to finally set up our environment, set up a virtual environment to install dependencies, and then finally we run our test against our Python calculator script that we're going to be running. That's basically what you're going to be doing. So we're going to be having 2 jobs, and job 2 is going to be depending on job 1, right? So this will have to be completed first, install everything, set up everything, and then finally we'll need to run our test. Okay, good. So once we have that, let's see the steps that we have in the guide. So the first thing we need to go ahead and do is create a virtual environment. So let's go ahead and do that in here. So create a virtual environment. Again, this is different from one operating system to the other. I'm on a Linux machine, Ubuntu. So the steps that I'm going to be using here is going to work for MacBook and Ubuntu machines. But if you're on a Windows, it's going to be a different step, and it might not work on your end. Okay, so let me just clear the terminal in here, and let's do ls so to see where I am. Okay, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is to create a virtual environment. So to create a virtual environment, I'm going to say Python 3 Python 3 -m, and then VNV, called my virtual environment VNV. Okay, this is going to work for guys on MacBook and on Linux machines. For Windows guys, yeah, the command to take a virtual environment is a bit different, so you can just Google it. It's just one simple line of command. I just happened to forget it. Or you can check out my video on introduction to Python, where I actually showed you how to do this in a Windows machine. Okay, so once I have that done, I'm going to do simple ls, and I can see I have a virtual environment right there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and activate my virtual environment. So I'm going to say source, and then vnv/bin/activate, and then to activate my virtual environment. And you can know your virtual environment is activated whenever you can see the name of the virtual environment within parentheses in front of the line in the terminal. So that's so that your virtual environment is created. So I want to go ahead and install a couple of things in this virtual environment. So let's go back. So install the virtual environment, create a virtual environment. Now I want to install PyTest. So PyTest is a Python library that helps us to run different tests on your Python APIs or Python applications. Okay, so in the future videos I showed you how to use PyTest. I have a whole series on PyTest, so you can check out the channel mains page on that video on PyTest. Okay, so I also have a video where we built an API, and then we wrote some PyTest testing on it or something like that. So you can check out that video as well. So let's go ahead and actually install PyTest. So I'm going to go ahead and simply say pip install, and then say PyTest, just like that. So PyTest, and it's going to go ahead and install PyTest in our virtual environment. So make sure your virtual environment is activated before you are installing this. Okay, so once we have that done, we are good to go. So let's go back and see. So we're going to go ahead and simply first of all we write our program. Okay, and then finally we write the different tests against our program. So and then finally we run the workflow and everything like that, and then create a git ignore file and all that. Okay, because we want to push the VNV to the virtual to the repository. So actually let's create a git ignore file. So I'm going to say touch.git ignore, or you can just go in VS Code and create a git ignore file. So I'm just going to go ahead online here. I'm just going to go ahead and search for something. So I'm going to this website called gitignore.io. Just search for that website, and then in here you can just type in the programming language that you want. So I'm going to simply type in Python. Okay, and then simply press enter. So this is going to give us a list of all the things that Python Python git ignore file needs to have. So I'm just going to go ahead and go into in here and simply paste that in here. So yeah, so this is going to make sure we ignore common things like .env files, env folder. This is the virtual environment folder itself and other stuff like that. Okay, so good. So once we have that done, let's go ahead and actually write let's see, let's go ahead and actually write the code for the calculator. And I have all this on my GitHub repository, so you guys can find this there. So I'm going to go ahead and simply pull up the code right here in scripts. So instead of scripts, I'm going to make this a module. So I'm going to go ahead and add underscore init underscore file in here. Okay, so if you don't know how this works, you can check out my introduction to Python series where I explain all this and what this underscore file means. Okay, so once I have that done, underscore file underscore init underscore .py file, instead of my scripts folder, I'm going to go ahead and create another folder. This is going to be tests. Okay, I'm going to call it test, where we're going to have all our tests written. So I'm going to call it test, and instead of our test folder, I'm going to have again my underscore init underscore .py file, just like that. Okay, so once we have that, we are good to go. So close all of that window. Okay, so in here, I'm going to go ahead and simply write the first test. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and simply write the, first of all, let's actually write the program first, which is going to be the calculator. So I'm going to call this one calculator.py. Okay, so instead of our calculator.py, you're going to go ahead and simply write the Python script for this calculator. So it's just going to be a very simple program, just a couple of lines. So def, I'm going to call this one add, and it's going to take in x. X, you can say x is going to be of type integer. We're going to take y and be of type int. We're going to be using type hints. Okay, so we're going to simply return x plus y. Or you can also use floats if you want. So you can say float. Okay, so this is just type hints, so floats. Okay, good. So once we have that, we're also going to go ahead and simply have another one down here. It's going to be called def, and it's going to be called subtract. Okay, you're going to take in x, it's going to be a float. You're going to take in y, it's going to be a float. You're going to go ahead and simply return x minus y. Okay, good. You're going to have another function right here. It's going to be called multiply, and you're going to have x, it's going to be of type int, y is going to be of type, okay, let's use float. Okay, my bad. We're just going to keep it float, so keep it float. So, okay, float. Float, just like that. So once we have this, I'm going to go down here, and then I'm going to return multiply, right? So x multiplied by y. That's it. Yeah, so that's it for our calculator. Just some simple stuff. You can also write a division function if you want. Okay, let's go ahead and write a division function. So def, and we're going to call division, and I'm going to start a y is going to be of type float, and with float again, and then I'm going to say return x, right? X divided by y. Okay, just like that. So good, we are good to go. So let me just inspect this to make sure I get the spellings right. So subtract, multiply, and then division, and then addition. Yeah, so those are the four functions our calculator can do, right? So good. So once we have this calculator written in here, we are good to go. So if you call this function, let's say for example we call this one add, and then finally pass in 10 and 10, 20 and 10, that's going to return to me for 30, right? So if I go into the terminal, let me just go ahead and clear this, and then change directory into my scripts, and then in here I'm going to simply say python 3, and then we call our calculator and run it. Now you can see, okay, it didn't print it out, so we can actually go ahead and actually print it out if you want to. Okay, so print, and then you can print out that function. So good. So go back in here, run the code again. So now you can see 30. So good, our calculator works fine. And you can try the other function if you want, but I don't want to waste your time, so I'm just gonna have those that there. Okay, good. So once we have the calculator written, now we're going to write a couple of tests for this calculator. So if you add the 30 and 20 and 30, 20 and 10, that the answer should be 30, right? So we're going to write a test to make sure I'll give it a bit of cases to test against, and then once it passes the test, then our calculator works fine. So good. So let's go ahead and do this. So I'm going to go ahead and create, instead of our test folder, I'm going to go ahead and create another folder in there. I'm going to call it test. Let me say, what should I even call it? Let me say test underscore 0. Test. Lowercase test underscore 01.py. So once we have that folder created, good. One thing I have to mention is the naming convention of this folder and the file. So this folder should be called test, and this one should start test underscore and then anything else, but should be having the word test in it. Okay, so I have test underscore, and then anything else can follow, but make sure you start with test. Okay, there's also the folder, just call it test. Okay, so if you don't do that, then you have an issue. Okay, so once we have this, then I'm going to go ahead and write the test for it. So I'm going to say from scripts dot calculators, I'm going to go ahead and import add. I'm going to say the subtraction function. I'm going to employ the multiply, and then finally the division. Okay, so once I have those imported, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm also going to go ahead and say from PyTest, I'm going to go ahead and import mark, and we'll use this just to run a couple of tests more. Okay, so the first test I want to do is just the test for let's test the subtraction function. So I'm going to say def, and I'm going to say test. Okay, this function also must be called test, must start with the name test. So test underscore and then anything else. So test, I'm going to say subtraction, subtract underscore function, and this function is going to take in x and y, and then it's going to take in the expected underscore result. Okay, so we're going to take in two values, x and y. They're going to also take in an expected value to make sure that the subtraction of the two values gives us the result that we want. So we're going to have an assert statement right here. We're going to assert the subtraction. We're going to call the subtraction function to pass in the x and the y. And you're going to assert that is going to be equals to the expected result. Okay, so once you perform the function, you call the addition, the subtraction function, you pass in x and y, and you make sure the result that you get back from here is going to be equal to the expected result. So once that's correct, then you have passed the test. So good. Yeah, so that's it, and we are good to go. So basically, to test this out, let's actually go ahead and specify actual values in it. So I'm just go ahead and copy this one more time. So copy this, and I'm going to comment this out for now. And the reason why I'm going to comment this out for now is because I want to use this somewhere else. So I'm going to paste it right here. Now I'm going to pass in actual value. So I'm going to go ahead and pass in here 20, and the other one is going to be 10, and then you're going to say 20 minus 10, as that should be 10, right? So we're going to go ahead and say actually I didn't even have to take it as arguments. Okay, so my bad, just wrong. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and simply pass it in here, so I don't need any of this anymore. Okay, good. So once we run this test, what it's going to go ahead and do is going to take in 10 and 20, do the subtraction of the two, and the answer should be 10. If it's 10, then you're going to go ahead and pass the test. So that's basically it. So let's go and actually make sure this works. Okay, so I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to be inside of my root directory, okay, where my test folder is. I'm going to simply say pytest, and then I'm going to press that. So run that, and you can see we have passed our test. So you can even do this and then say -v to be verbose, and you run it. Now you can see we have passed our test. So subtraction test has passed. Okay, good, because 10 minus 20 is going to be, 20 minus 10 is going to be 10, right? So if I change this to be, let's say 19, then that's going to be wrong. Okay, so if I go ahead and run that again, okay, we failed the test because the 20 minus 10 is not 19, it is 10. So you can see the assertion failed. 10 is not equals to 20. Good. Okay, once we have everything there, we are good to go. So let me change this back to 10. Okay, so we are good to go for this. So actually I'm going to convert this to be, because in most cases you want to just run your test against one set of variables. You want to run against multiple, so that's why I have this right here. Okay, so let me uncomment this right here, and I'm going to use the decorator, mark decorator. So I'm going to say mark, and we say dot parameters, just like this. So dot parameterize, just like this, dot parameterize. So mark dot parameterized, and then finally I'm going to go ahead and specify the string here. So I'm going to expect y and x. I'm also going to go ahead and expect pass in the expected underscore result. And what this function is going to go ahead and do is the following. So I'm going to go ahead and do this right here, keep this right here. And I'm going to pass in the set of values that I want to test. So the first one must be the x. So 10 and 20. The expected result should be 20 minus 10. That should be 10, right? So we just copy this and repeat a couple of times more. So let's say 40. The answer should be 30, right? And let's say 70. The answer should 70 and 20, the answer should be 50, right? And then let's say 60 and 40, the answer should be 20. So that's our test. So let's go ahead and run this again one more time to make sure we pass all that. So run it, and you can see we have one failed. Let's see. I think I have a mistake right here, in here. So I'm going to go ahead and specify x comma y, and then the expected result, and then finally I go ahead and specify this right here. So let's see, x and then y and then the expected result, and then finally you run this test. So I forgot basically the commas right here, so sorry for that. So once I have that fixed, actually let's go ahead and run this again. So run the test, and now you can see we have passed all our tests. All the tests have passed, and you can make one fail, and you can see that as well. So if I change this to be, let's say 30, and that should be fail. Okay, so if I run the test again, it should fail. One should fail. Okay, so we can see one failed right here. So 20 is not 10, it's not 30, right? So good. So let me just go back and change this back to its original value. So right there. So once we have this test, you can write this test for any other value that you want. Okay, so I'm just gonna copy this and then paste it right here, and this is gonna be, just go ahead and fix that. It's gonna be addition, right? So let's call it addition, addition function, and addition underscore. Sorry, just change the name here. So let me say addition. That's one of the bad sides of copy pasting. So someone say add, and then I'm going to put this, and this should be expected result. Okay, so let's go ahead and specify. So the 20 and 10 should be 30, 40 and 10 should be 50, 70 and 20 should be 90, and then 60 and this should be 100. Okay, so you can write many tests as you want. You can write them for division, the multiplication, but I really don't want to waste your time. Basically, you just have to copy this code and repeat this code over and over again, just changing the function that you are calling right here, and also changing the input values and the expected values. That's all. Okay, so let me just go ahead and run the test again, and make sure we pass all our tests. Yeah, and we pass all the tests. So good, good. Once we have everything there running, we are good to go. So once we can go ahead now and write the finally, we can write the workflow for it. Okay, we already created a git file, so let's go ahead and actually write the workflow for this. Okay, so let's go ahead and write the workflow. So to write the workflow, I'm just going to go back in here, and I'm going to go ahead and create another file in here. I'm going to call this one project underscore 02 dot YAML file. So YAML file is like this, and in here I'm going to go ahead and pass in the name of the workflow. In the name, we're going to call it project -02. Okay, that's going to be the name of the project. And then on which event do we want, or which events or triggers we want, I want to basically, whenever I push the code to GitHub, so I want, whenever I push the code to GitHub, those workflows should run. Okay, so once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and specify jobs. So the first job is going to be dealing with, finally, let's go back in here, let's look at the first job. The first job is going to be setting up our environment, and that one is going to be running the test. So the first job is going to be called test underscore setup underscore hyphen env. Okay, so basically env. So env. Okay, so what this job is going to go ahead and do is the following. So you're going to say it's going to be runs on, you're going to say ubuntu hyphen latest. So you can see all these other versions of ubuntu we have. I'm just going to be using ubuntu latest. Okay, so I'm going to go specify the steps that we need to follow to run this action. So the first one, we're going to give this going to have a name here, and this name is what's going to go ahead and do is pull git repo. So we're going to pull repository. So we're going to pull the code from repository, and you're going to be using the GitHub action that we defined, which is going to be called actions / checkout, and I'm going to specify the version. I'm going to use version 3. Good. So once we have that, okay, this is going to be users. Okay. So that's the first thing we're going to do, pull the code from the GitHub repository. And then I'm going to have another step for it to do here. And this step is going to be install Python 3.10. Okay, so what we're going to go ahead, we're going to go ahead and use another GitHub action for this one. We say actions and then / and this is going to be setup Python. We're going to be using version 4. Okay, that's what we used. Okay, for once we have that done, I'm going to go ahead and specify the version that we want to use. So we're going to say width, and you're going to go ahead and say width, and you're going to go ahead and simply say Python underscore version. It's going to be Python version is going to be 3.10. Okay, 3.10. Okay, so once we have that done, let's go ahead and specify now another step that you want to do, which is going to be upgrading our pip environment. Sometimes you need to do this. Okay, so I'm going to say a name, and this name is going to, what this action is going to be doing is called upgrade grade pip. Okay, And what we're going to go ahead and do is simply run a simple command, which is going to be Python and then -m pip install, and then pip install upgrade, and then pip, just like that. So that's basically the command, and this is a command that you run in your typical terminal or CMD on Windows. So just saying Python -m pip install upgrade pip. Okay, good. So once we have that done, you're going to go ahead and have another set of actions that we want to perform. So the action that we want to perform now, we're going to give it a name. So we're going to say -name, and you're going to go ahead and specify install Python dependencies, or dependencies, just like that. So what you want to do is just going to say run, and you're going to go ahead and say pip install, and then I'm going to say -r, and then requirements requirements. Let me just get the spelling right. So requirements.txt. So we're going to go ahead and create a requirement.txt file, and that's going to go ahead and install everything within our requirement.txt file. Okay. In case you have any dependencies that you want to install, you can just go ahead and install them right here. So let's go ahead and create a requirement.txt file. So to create the requirement.txt file, I'm just going to make sure virtual environment is activated. Okay, so we're going to be pushing requirement from this virtual environment into our requirement.txt file. So I'm going to say pip freeze into requirements.txt, just like that, and press enter. So that's going to go ahead and create a requirement.txt file, and this requirement.txt file is going to be right here, requirements.txt, and that's the file that you're referring to right here. Okay, so that's going to be the end of the first job. Set up the environment first. So the next one is now we're going to run our test. Okay, so to run our test again, now we're going to create another job to do that for us, and this job is going to be depending on this one to complete. So this one completes first, and then finally we run our next job. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create the next job. We're going to say test underscore test. Let's just call it, say, test run test. Okay, so we say run test. Okay, so this is the name of the virtual environment, and it's going to be running on another runs on. It's going to be Ubuntu latest. Okay, good. Okay, so once we have that specified, we're going to now go ahead and specify it needs, right? It needs for this test to complete first. So we're going to wait for this to complete first, this job to complete first before this one begins to run. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and simply pass in the name of the test that we want it to wait for. So it needs this test to complete before it runs, right? So this completes first, and then this starts. So this is going to wait for this to complete. Otherwise, it'll be running in parallel, right? So we don't want them to run in parallel. We want this job right here to wait on this one to finish. That's why we said it needs this to finish. Okay, so once we have this done, we're going to go ahead and specify the steps, and the steps that we're going to go ahead and do, we're going to give this first step the name, and the name is going to be pull. We're going to be pulling the code from repo, right? You're going to pull our code from pull the code from the repository, and then finally what you want to do here, we're going to say users, and you're going to use the action checkout. Okay, so checkout, and you're going to pay at version 3. Good. So once we have that done, you're going to go ahead and specify the name right here. So I'm going to have another step instead of our steps. So instead it's going to be give the step a name. This is going to be run PyTest. So with this we're going to go ahead and begin to run our PyTest on it. So I'm going to go ahead and specify the code right here. And what I want to do, pip install PyTest, because it's a new environment. That's why we need to install PyTest. Okay, so this actually here we don't actually need to install the requirement.txt file, because we really don't need this. I'm just demonstrating it to you, but in actuality we don't actually need to install this right here. Okay, we don't need to install that. Okay, so once we have that done, you don't actually need to install the requirements in this case, but I'm just going to be installing it. Okay, so install the requirements. Imagine if you work on a real world project, then you need to have that installed. So requirements there. So I'm just having the requirements installed. Okay, so basically we install the PyTest, and then finally we run this command. And I show you this command earlier on is the command that runs our different tests. So if I go in here, you can see this command is what runs our test, and this is what I specified right here. Good. So that's basically all we need for this to work. So we can check through to make sure everything works. So yeah, so that's basically what we need for this to work. So you can check through to make sure everything is fine. So we have given our workflow a name, We specify on which trigger, on which event it should run. We give decide first job, which runs on Ubuntu latest, the different steps, pull the pull everything from the repository, install the Python environment. We're going to install in Python 3.10, and then finally we upgrade our pip, and then install everything from our requirement.txt file. And then the job 2 is going to be called run test, and what simply does is it's going to be running on Ubuntu latest. It needs the first job to complete, so it needs that. So it specify which job it should wait upon. Okay, you can have multiple jobs to wait upon, but in this case we're just waiting upon one job. Then we have the steps. We have the first step, which has a name called code from repository. That's going to be pulling the code from the repository from our master branch. And then finally you run our PyTest, which is going to be installing PyTest, and then finally running our test on our calculator. So good. So that's all we need to do. So once we have it done, let's go ahead and actually push our code to GitHub, and let's see how that works. So when say git add, okay, so I'm in my root directory, so root of my project. So git add and git commit, and I'm going to give it a message. It's going to be second commit. Okay, so that's it. And I'm going to git push origin to the master branch. So push that. So good. So let's wait for that to be pushed. And once it's pushed, we go back to GitHub right here. If I go into my different job actions, now we should be able to see the action here running. So you can see project 2 action running. So project 1 again will run because we specified it to run on push. So it's going to run as well. But now our focus is project 2. So as you can see, it's running the setup instructions, and then finally it's going to go ahead and run so the setup is complete. Now it's going to go ahead and run the PyTest on our calculator to make sure the calculator works as we defined it to. So once the test is passed, then we should get a good, and then that's it. So let's just give it some time, and you can see now it's completed. So job 1, we went ahead and installed everything that we needed, install everything from install Python dependencies, which went ahead and installed PyTest and every other thing like that. And then finally it got completed, and then we have run test. And run test, this is what run test does. Simply run the test, run PyTest, and you can see we have passed all our tests right here. So you can see all our tests have been passed. So yeah, that's basically how we can use GitHub Actions. Again, if you want more complex project, I have a project where I build a backend application API, and then I finally run GitHub Actions to help us to deploy it to Heroku. So you can check out that video. The link is going to be in the description, or you can find it on my channel's main page. Okay. Or if I don't leave the link, you can just ask me in the comment section, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Okay. So hopefully I remember to add a link. So yeah, so that's basically how you can set up the GitHub Actions. Okay. So project 2, we have done that already, so good, we are good to go. Now you can also have jobs that others are running in series and others are running in parallel. So you can have another job called test random, and this is going to be running in parallel to these 2 jobs. And let's go and actually see how we can add that to it, just to demonstrate it to you. It doesn't it's not much, but we're just adding it to demonstrate it to you. So you can have another test job right here. Now you can call it anything you want. You can say test hyphen random random. Okay, and I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to simply say runs on, and I'm going to say it's going to be running on Ubuntu latest. Okay, so it's going to be running on Ubuntu latest, and then finally we're going to specify it doesn't need anything, so it's going to be running in parallel to job 1 and to these 2 jobs that we have. Okay, so it's going to be running in parallel, so we're going to say steps, and then the step we're going to give it a name, and this is going to be pull code from, let's say, pull code from repo. Okay, so pull the code from the repository, and once the code is pulled, what you want to do is you want to use an action first. So it's going to say users, and what you're going to say, you're going to use actions. This is going to be at version. We're going to use version 3 for that. Okay, and then you're going to have another step right here. Name. You're going to call this one print hello world. And also going to simply run is you're going to simply run this hello world program that we had earlier on. So you're going to say runs, and we say Python 3. This is going to be in scripts, so /scripts hello world.py. So that's basically it. Yeah, so that's all we need to do. It's giving me some warnings right here. See, try to save this. So users, and then actions, and then specify the actions, and then finally we have the print hello world. Let me just hover on this and see name for your step display on GitHub. Let me see. This is steps. Okay, make sure I didn't get any typos. Okay, so Ubuntu latest, and then steps, and the first name, and then the action, GitHub Actions, checkout version 3, and then finally have name. It's gonna be this name, and then finally run. Okay, it's run and not run. So my bad, it's run and not run. So that's my error. So run, and it's going to go ahead and simply run this Python script right there. So good. Once I have that saved, now let's go ahead and do a push now. So now we have three different jobs running. So two will be running depending on each other, right, in series, and the other one will be running in parallel. So git let me say git add, git commit, and this is going to be my third commit. Okay, so that, and then finally commit that, and then finally do a git push origin to the master branch, and then push. Okay, so let's go and see here. Let me just go into the actions. Now I should now see these three different jobs running. So three, if I go into here, I can see now I have three jobs. So you can see this is running in series, these two running in series, while this is running parallel on a different runner. So it's going to be running much faster, while these ones are going to be a bit slower because they're depending on each other, right? So yeah, that's basically how GitHub Actions work, how you can use GitHub Actions. Again, if you want more complicated examples of this, you can check out my channel where we build an API and use GitHub Actions to help us to deploy it on Heroku. So when you push your code, the new version of the API gets deployed on Heroku automatically without you having to do anything. So that saves you a lot of time. We'll learn about how to keep your secret inside of your GitHub account. Here you can store your different secret information, like passwords, Heroku account access, and all that. You can store all that in here, and it's GitHub Actions is just a lot of stuff to do with. Okay, so if you want that video, you can check out that video. The link is going to be in the description, or you can find it on my channel's main page. So this was just an introduction to DevOps with GitHub Actions. Again, guys, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. I'll do my best to get back to you. And if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, kindly consider subscribing, supporting me. If you want to buy me a coffee, the link is going to be in the description, or you can buy me a coffee. So guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, to share, and to subscribe to the YouTube channel for more videos like this. Thank you, and see you in the next one. Keep safe.